Thank you so much, Dinusha, Tara, Yorisha, everyone who's made this panel possible, and also a deepest respect to the panelists who've spoken already. I've learned so much and been so inspired by your words. What I really would like to do is just tell some stories of how I have experienced the beautiful things each of my fellow panelists have talked about, how practically we can and we are bringing these experiences of gratitude, of forgiveness, of real connection to teachers, to students, to parents, to the whole school system. And I just want to point out, as I was listening to you, Jamie, I remembered another program in the US that I've been connected to and that I deeply appreciate. It's a newer program called the Mindful Directors Initiative, and it's training mindfulness teachers already. It's just a program to place mindfulness teachers as mindfulness directors in schools where they have a chance to share mindfulness with students, to coach teachers in, refining their mindfulness offerings to students, to share mindfulness with the administrators and also with parents. So just another model of some of the ways whole school approaches are working. I'm a fellow with this new organization, and they've just started with a few schools in a few different cities, but they'll be expanding to more and more schools. So for me, that's a very beautiful manifestation of understanding how it's really when the whole system of a school begins to be in touch with and practice mindfulness that the transformation can be the deepest, is when it starts to be within every aspect and in the DNA, so to speak, of our education. And as a nun, when we went to India and on a whole tour teaching mindfulness in schools and retreats for educators, that was our approach, where we would have presentations for the students. We would also teach mindfulness to the parents. We teach mindfulness to the teachers, and the whole school would have like a kind of a week retreat in a way of learning mindfulness with Thich Nhat Hanh, with monks and nuns and lay teachers. So I was really touched by what Venerable Dhammajiva shared about, the real gift, the real transmission that happens isn't through words. It's through the energy of mindfulness that the teacher, that whoever it is, the provider, the adult, the parent, the yoga teacher, is manifesting in their very being. And I just want to share what Thich Nhat Hanh said to us on a retreat. And in the Plum Village tradition, our week-long retreats involve hundreds of children and young people, as well as maybe 1,000 adults. And so many children were in front watching him give a talk. Each morning he would give a talk to the children first, and then we would take the children out, have our children's program, and he would continue with a Dharma talk to the adults. But what he said to the children and all of us was, the greatest gift that children receive on a retreat is not what's said, is not any particular teaching or words. It is the noble silence that the community practices. So if we translate that into a school environment, of course, there's not going to be a lot of noble silence in a school, but we have an inner stillness that each of the panelists has talked about. That is the actual lived expression of mindfulness, of ethics, of values, of care, is our own ability to be still and clear in our own heart and mind, which always, as everyone has shared, mindfulness always carries within it kindness, and an ability to be with what is. So whenever we're with children, if that's what's in our heart, that is the biggest thing that happens in transmitting mindfulness and transmitting ethics and values, is our own peace, really. And that's why his most recent book for educators, Happiness, Happy Teachers Change the World, is that's why it's titled that, because when we are able to touch this experience of peace inside, then we're able to really share it. And actually, children pick up on it right away, and it begins to transform their lives immediately. So a story about this, a teacher had a very difficult class of, I think they were third or fourth graders. It was in a school that was a school with a lot of challenges in a low-income neighborhood in New York. The children would come in often, not having all the things they needed at home. And so there was a lot of chaos in the classroom. And this teacher had begun learning mindfulness on our retreats, and she didn't know what to do to help the class calm down. But she was learning that, as everyone on the panel has shared already, it begins with us. And so she decided she had a mindfulness bell, like this one, a little smaller. And she brought it to class, and she said, you all, every class would begin with the students shouting, throwing things, being very unruly. So she just said quietly to whoever was listening, I'm just going to start each class with a bell and taking a few breaths to calm myself. You can do what you like. You can join me or not, but that's what I'm going to do for myself. And so she had a lot of freedom in offering this. She wasn't expecting them to do it or not. She was just taking this space for herself. So she invited the bell. She breathed in, she breathed out. In fact, why don't we just do that together? It never hurts to experience it for ourselves. So as I invite the bell, I just invite you to feel your breath. A simple act of returning to your body. She spent a minute or two caring for herself, and a few students started to join her. The first few days she did it. The rest were playing around, yelling, screaming, running around the classroom. She continued the second week. About half the class started to sit and breathe with her. And they sincerely enjoyed this moment of calm, of coming back to themselves, of being in touch with themselves. And by 2-3 weeks in, the whole class, without her forcing, without her cajoling, without her punishing, the whole class was drawn like nectar to this sweetness of silence, of stillness. And that's how her class would begin every day. So her own practice of peace began to pervade and radiate and invite everyone in the classroom in for those few moments of calm every day. Since this is also a time to explore forgiveness, gratitude, I'd really like to share this wonderful practice of beginning anew that's in the Plum Village tradition that can be applied very well in a secular public school, without any spiritual or religious trappings. It can be applied very well in a school setting with students as well as teachers. So this is a practice of sitting down and appreciating each other. And it's also a practice of clearing out whatever harm has happened that needs to be healed. So the way I have done it with students and the way I've seen teachers do it, several different ways. I had a chance to go into a school in the UK, actually. It's called the Dharma school. So this wasn't a secular public school. It's a private school in Bristol. But the teacher at the beginning of the year had invited all the students to write down what they appreciated about every other student. So they had done it in this flower format, which we would do in Plum Village. So you put the name of the student in the middle of the circle, then their petals that come out from the circle. So that you pass the paper around and everyone writes in a petal one thing they appreciate about that student. So it might be a picture they draw, it might be words, depending on the age of the students. So I came in, I was a nun at the time with other monks and nuns. We were teaching for about a week, mindfulness in this school. And I came into a classroom and a 10-year-old boy, this was 6 months into their class year, he brought out from his locker this drawing that they did at the beginning of the year, where every student wrote something beautiful about him. And he showed it to me. He was so happy. And he said, "Are we going to do this again? I really want to do this again." So this kind of sharing our appreciation for each other is deeply touching. He kept it well and preserved and clean and uncrumpled for 6 months and showed it to me and said, "Can we please do this again?" So I know a teacher in Berlin, in Freiburg, Germany, who has done this with her students. She, every few months into the start of the year, she has them all write down one sentence of what they appreciate in their classmates, and she compiles them and gives them back to each student as a page. And she says every time she does this, the whole atmosphere in the class changes. There's more trust, there's more positivity, there's many fewer experiences of behavior issues, that she doesn't have to do as much behavior management because the students feel more at home in the class. They feel more seen, they feel more loved, they feel more accepted. She also told me a story about a boy who was coming into her class from another school or from another class that in Germany they stay with, in this school they stayed with the same students over a few years, but this was a boy coming in from another class who she knew to have many behavioral issues. And she prepared her class saying, "Let us embrace this child with a lot of love and a lot of care to help him. Let's really, as a whole class, be very kind and welcoming of him." And she asked the students, "Are you on board? Do you agree?" And they said, "Yes, we want to do this." And they all took care to be kind to this boy and to include him in their games and to be positive toward him. And his behavior changed completely. The difficulties he had in other classes, he really didn't show in this environment. So the attitude of a teacher towards a student, especially a student of perhaps a marginal identity, in the US or Europe, this might be a student of color or a student from Islamic faith or a faith that's not the dominant faith, a student who's differently abled, a student who has a difficult home environment. The attitude of a teacher towards students who have whatever kind of difficulty or marginal identity is extremely important. There's a book, The 5 Dimensions of Engaged Teaching, and they quote a study done. Bridget Hamra and Robert Pianta found that kindergarten teachers' reports of negative feelings toward a particular student predicted problematic social and academic outcomes for that student through at least 4th grade. In addition, researchers found that students take cues from their teacher in determining whether a peer is likable or not. If a teacher dislikes a student, peers are more likely to dislike that student as well. So we can see what a huge impact our way of seeing a student has on them and on the other students in the class, on the whole culture. So learning to overcome, to examine our own biases as teachers, as administrators, so important. And bringing into our education ways to help everyone in the classroom, all the students, see and heal their biases can play a huge role in reducing social conflicts, prejudice, tension. There's a lot of research also on the power of mindfulness to help reduce bias, the implicit bias that we're all, it's by osmosis that we accumulate and learn these biases. We don't want to be biased towards people, but through what we hear, through the things we pick up in our society, every one of us has implicit biases, and mindfulness is shown to be very helpful in helping us to undo them by holding them compassionately. Everyone on the panel has mentioned the power of mindfulness with compassion to transform our minds and hearts. So that's one of the ways we can approach our own biases and the biases in others, so that we can gently, with love, reduce them and bring more justice, bring more equality, bring more respect for all of the different peoples that are in our education systems. So I'm so grateful for this opportunity to be together with you all and share. Thank you so much.